Yo, I'm Will. Welcome. I call this little experiment Anything is Everything. It's gotta be called something. The intention here is to share interesting, courageous, enlightening, vulnerable, strange, silly conversations to maybe hopefully inspire something in you. Alright, cool, bye. Hey, welcome back to Anything is Everything. I'm your host, Will Tanner, and today I'm joined by Zahara Devi, a pleasure-based leadership coach for women. And do you want to explain a little bit about what that is? What kind of stuff what you do assist women through?
Yeah. I help women get unstuck from self-sabotaging patterns like playing small, people-pleasing, not using their voice to voice their desires or what they want in life, and doing that all through using the tantric and somatic-based practices and unearthing their pleasure potential and connecting to their feminine power. Yeah, so ultimately as well, I help women to overcome taboos around their sexuality and maybe taboos around money and in certain areas of their life so that they can experience sexual and financial freedom.
Amazing. Yeah, I've really noticed for myself that a lot of the sexual insecurities and those kinds of things are super related to like just my general health, my relationship with money.
Yeah.
So like what is that all about? How is like sexuality and money so tied together?
Yeah, well, I've come to really recognize that a lot of the things that come up within sexuality and within aspects and thoughts and belief systems around money and survival and security are all stemming from the same chakra, from our root chakra and from our roots. And all of that is connected through our nervous system. So the way that we take care of our nervous system and the awareness that we have around our nervous system can implement more easier and healthier ways to navigate our relationships to not only ourselves and our connections, but to our relationships with money and within our sexuality, because it's really coming at it from that core angle.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
and the first chakra is really related to like survival as well, right? So,
yeah.
Well, in my understanding, I don't know. I just think it's so interesting that like all of those things are so tied together, and that like it's so easy to feel unsafe.
Yeah.
You know, especially when we're younger.
Yeah.
Is that not where most of our problems come from? You know?
Yeah, and for me, I think a large aspect of that is recognizing that we're not really developing a sense of having a healthy, holistic relationship to those areas because we're taught to either repress or ignore it or to utilize certain means of money and survival and sexuality for certain intentions that aren't necessarily soul-fulfilling, that aren't necessarily opening ourselves up to safer connections with others, and even being able to navigate what safety even feels like in the body. And I think a lot of things that block sexual freedom, even like freedom around money and how money impacts your personal life and personal freedom, is really based around how relaxed you feel, and can be navigated from getting out of the head and into the body and learning how the nervous system functions, so that you can actually start building a healthier relationship and with those areas and uncover things that actually can integrate with you into more personal power.
Yeah, that's huge, eh?
Yeah.
The idea of like relaxation or surrender versus resistance. So, I mean, tell me about the importance of relaxation when it comes into like, you know, sexual experience.
Yeah, that's a good question. There's certain aspects of there's so many, that's a really big question. There's so many angles to navigate that. I think on a general basis, we're responding in our nervous systems from either a very autonomic response, which is, heightened states of sensation, short breath, increased heart rate, sort of the hyperactivity that you feel when you start feeling a little bit more anxious in life or in your circumstances or connections. And then there's the parasympathetic, which is coming from more of a deepened breath, consciously relaxation. It's coming from a state within the nervous system where it allows more spaciousness for you to feel your body and to come out of the head and out of the thinking and into more of a body awareness and feeling. And that really impacts sexuality hugely, because oftentimes when we've grown up in a conditioned society or within family structures or belief dynamics that make us feel like it's not safe to connect to our sexuality, or that it's necessarily something that we should be doing, and that it's something that you should only be doing behind closed doors, with a certain person and in a certain context. And that can create a whole bunch of stories and narratives around how to relate in your sexuality with people in the world and in general in intimacy outside of those constructs and contexts. So how that impacts someone can really make them feel like, okay, well, if I'm not supposed to be doing this, or if sexuality is inherently something that's like hush hush or like wrong or whatever the story is, they might feel a little bit more anxious around navigating that in their life circumstances. So what happens is that when they end up in a sexual context with someone, maybe they're on a first date, or they are dating someone for a while, but they have a lot of uncertainties or insecurities around what to do or how to navigate, because it hasn't been normalized. The conversation hasn't been normalized. The education around it hasn't been normalized. So what happens is they get up in their heads around, like, am I doing the right thing? Like, how do I look? Like, is my partner feeling pleasure? Like, what should I do? Or like, how should I, it's like the thinking brain is just go, 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 go. It's like constantly running on this trajectory and this accelerator of like, thinking, overthinking too much. And then what that does is it creates a disconnect from actually being in the body, and it disconnects someone from their breath. It disconnects them from being able to actually connect with their voice, because they're so in that hyper-aroused state, and that they have a hard time really sinking into the spaciousness around what the nervous system can feel when it's in a relaxed state, which is more freedom and ease and safety around being able to communicate and being able to actually like feel on a sensational level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so huge. What came up for me was like just remembering really early experiences and thinking like, the examples of sex that I saw was just like, the terrible pornography, where it's just like there's no love, there's just like a lot of action and like
a lot of that thrust.
A lot of thrusting. big, heavy thrusting. And then, the other exposure was then like through like friends or older friends, And then so you get these examples that are either secondhand or, Hollywood basically. And then when you get into those situations, it's so different, and you maybe like try to act in the way that you saw or that you were told it should be, but then it just feels bad, and then like the spirals are so big around that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think it's become so taboo?
Oh, well, there's one thought before we get onto that question. That there's like a thought that came up to me as I was hearing you express, was like this idea that, because we're not being taught to base our decisions and choice around our sexuality from our own internal referencing point. It's like we're constantly being referenced to seek outside of ourselves for answers or clarity around how to navigate our sexuality. And of course, the resources around that are so limited. I'm noticing that it's progressing in a more progressive direction, or at least a more enhanced direction for building more like clear and safer awareness around how to learn our sexuality in a way that feels holistic and welcoming and safe to navigate. But yeah, I think there's a lot of complication that gets put into place because we're being given a lot of misinformation or a lot of missing pieces around how to actually have an enjoyable sexual experience. And a lot of that is coming from a place of not actually doing things for ourselves. Like, we're not basing what our choice around that because it feels good for us. We're like trying to please our partner, or we're trying to do what it's like in the porn videos, or we're trying to go off the advice of our family like our big brothers or sisters, or what our friends around us are saying. And it's creating a filter of how we navigate those experiences in our own personal life, when there could be so much more satisfaction and pleasure being unearthed when we actually just take a moment to like breathe into our nervous system and into our body and ask our body, what is it that feels good for me right now? Like, what would feel like, what do I want? What do I want to feel right now? Like, how do I want to feel that, and where do I want to feel that on my body? A lot of our focus goes towards our pelvis. Like, all right, let's aim for the orgasm, the clitoris. Like, we gotta rub it, or like we gotta like go for the jackpot, the high point of the stimulation, which is like the peak of arousal. And I think there's a whole huge aspect of the journey of pleasure that gets missed out in that, like around actually spending more than 5-10 minutes like in the build-up phase and the foreplay aspect of that. Like, there could be so much orgasmic potential that gets felt and played out through not just going for the destination, or the if there is a destination, like to actually taking out destination completely altogether, and actually just enjoying what the body's feeling in this moment instead of overriding the body's desires and what it wants. We think like, oh, pleasure is supposed to look like this and feel like this, so I must do it this way. But really, pleasure can be like you just holding each other. It could just be you gently touching your skin on an area on the body that isn't necessarily deemed as erogenous, even though I deem the whole body as erogenous. Like, there's so many aspects of neural pathways in the body that can be felt, that can heighten oxytocin and chemicals in the brain that can really enhance the feeling of goodness. And that's what I really feel like pleasure is. It's just like an overall state of goodness, and what allows us to feel connected to ourselves in a good way. And so that can either look and come out as a sensuality, or a heightened aspect of the senses, or it could look like diving into like ripples and waves of orgasmic pleasure upon orgasmic pleasure upon orgasmic pleasure. Really, there's such a vast degree of what that can look like. So that's just what came up for me when I was hearing you express your sort of experience with that, and how it reminded you of back in the day. And I think a lot of aspects of who knows, I don't know the answer around why sexuality is taboo. I think I was raised in a completely non-taboo household. I started experiencing like clitoral orgasms when I was 3 years old with other girlfriends that would come over. We'd play naked doctor, she'd tie me up, and we'd literally just have tea parties with the intention of like rubbing on each other and just having make-out sessions. And like, we knew what we were doing, but we didn't really fully understand why we were doing it, but we were doing it. And then I would ask questions to my mother, and she would give me honest answers around my sexuality. And there wasn't really any inhibition, aside from just, choosing what felt was safe, and that was coming from a place of consent, as long as that was a big aspect of the dynamic. But yeah, I feel like I haven't quite fully understood why society deems sexuality as such a huge taboo. I feel, and I often get reminded of that fact almost every time I go into a taxi cab ride. I all of a sudden becomes a therapist session where like they start telling me about their marriages and their problems with their sex life, and maybe they got like erectile issues that they need help with, and they start talking to me, and I don't even know the person, and it's just like it baffles me to the idea that there are some people where they will just start opening up these closed doors to people that they don't even know of because that person created safety in the environment for them to be able to open up. And I think there's a level of acceptance and openness that I hold in the way that I carry and live my life, that it makes it safe for people to share their lives around sexuality, even though I don't know them. And I don't fully know why it's taboo. It's been around since, I don't know, like since the beginning of time, pretty much. Sex work has been one of the first oldest professions, and it's still deemed as some of the most disgraceful or untasteful forms of profession, even though it's not. There's so much dissolution around it. So.
Yeah, it's weird how like Hollywood just hypersexualizes everything, but that's okay, but then like the full extent of it, where it's like an actual like one-to-one situation where there's like therapy being provided and an exchange of love and in several senses, then it becomes not okay.
Well, and what what's ultra triggering is like Hollywood and all these different movie productions, they not only like they hypersexualize some of the things that happen in movie scenes and stuff, but the amount of violence that is accepted in our media narrative compared to our sexuality, it's just mind-blowing how much acceptance is there and being given space for, and there isn't so much around our sexuality. And I mean, I think there's certain levels around movie production where like legally they're not allowed to share more than 3 minutes of a lovemaking scene or like a sex scene, really? Because it would be deemed legally as pornographic. Okay, yeah. So they have a legal commitment, I think. I would have to check my resources on that, right. But I think they have a legal commitment around keeping it quite contained. So of course, like the whole vastness of what's being portrayed in 3 minutes around a sex scene is very like to the point, like like round up against the wall, we're gonna penetrate and she's gonna orgasm within a minute, like, and that's it filters a certain narrative and idea around how sexuality is portrayed, but it's also because there's a certain responsibility that they're supposed to have as movie producers and filmmakers that can't really share too much beyond that unless it's maybe an educational film. Yeah,
that's so interesting. I never thought of that. There's like the time frame, because it always like happens so fast and like, oh dude, that guy's already.
I've timed it. I put on a Game of Thrones episode last week, and I wanted to test that theory, so I timed it like a theme, an opening theme, where there was a sex scene, and it was within 3 minutes. Yeah. I was like, oh, okay, so I have to do some more tests around that to be sure, like for 100%. But yeah, I remember hearing that somewhere. So.
Yeah. That was a super sexualized show as well, and like how I think it might have been also in the books, quite sexual, but like there's so much more to it, Yeah,
well, it's interesting, like what narrative gets chosen to continue throughout society, because when an author is trying, I'm totally presuming at this point, but like when an author, I presume, is creating a narrative of an era and a time when that was probably very prevalent. Rape was very prevalent. Nudity was probably very exposed in harems and around like sex work. That they're just trying to portray the imagery and the lifestyle of what was in context to that time. And part of me wonders like if that's actually beneficial to continue perpetuating that filter or narrative of that context when it's so clearly known that was the case to it. But maybe it also adds to the dramatization and the excitement of something. The feeling, maybe it enhances feeling in people when they get stimulated by seeing it, or who
Mm-hmm.
knows.
Yeah, I totally hear that. I think what I get really bothered when it's like, there was that show about the like Dungeons and Dragons and those like evil creatures. It was super popular anyway. But the kids are like in high school and they're showing these like super sexual scenes of these like high school kids. And I'm like, it actually made me stop watching the show.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting because, valid, totally valid. And a lot of our sexual activity happens, like our more conscientious and like chosen sexual interactions are coming from a very pubescent time, or at least for me, I can speak for myself. I started engaging sexually when I was 13. Some people wait till they're 18 or 24 or whatever, or longer, but yeah, and maybe prematurely at some degrees, without really the proper education around consent and boundaries, and also having the tools of navigating enough self-esteem and self-worth to really navigate enough confidence and assuredness that by me voicing what I want and what I need, and even knowing what those things are, that would be welcomed and safe to express. Because I don't think that that's normalized a lot. So then there's a lot of silencing that happens, and a lot of dimming of what feels safe for an individual to actually feel and do, and it's all the actions are being done to feel love and acceptance from the outside world or from the individuals that they're interacting with. And so it's not being done from your own personal power or personal sovereignty. It's coming from a state of need and wanting to feel like a sense of belonging through intimacy and through connection.
Yeah, totally. I feel like so many things, whether it's sexual in nature, or it's like just like problems with people's out of control egos, or a lack of confidence or anything, it all comes back to like just wanting to connect with people, or like being a block in connection.
Yeah, and that's kind of like reminding me of just about how connected sexuality is to so many aspects of our life that is not just genital based. It's like it is so highly connected to our emotional states and to our sense of how we think about ourselves. And when we're not given the environment, or at least we're not exploring the environments where safety to express our emotions and ways to navigate that in a way that feels enhancing towards connection, it feels like it creates a lot of hindrance to actually be able to explore sexuality at its fullest potential, because we're blocked to even feeling our emotional states throughout our daily lives. And even just when I think about certain clients that are afraid to talk to their wives about how they feel, or don't have the communication or the words to describe what they're feeling to people that they deeply love, then it also implements and creates a lot of self-shame and even sometimes guilt around not being able to be honest and transparent about what's actually happening in the moment for them emotionally, and how that then they find outlets around how to create that connection within themselves through either going towards porn or finding alternative ways of sexual pleasure, either honestly or not honestly in their relationships. But it's the point of it is that they're trying to really actually establish connection and to others and to themselves in their emotions, and be able to access more of that capacity within themselves. That's how I really see it, at least anyway.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it seems like being able to connect with people should be like the easy part, because like we're all in this together on some level, but then people feel so alienated, and for some reason, like they're the only one going through this, or that kind of thing, you know?
Mm.
It's interesting. There's that same reflection in our men's group, is that, you know, I shared this with you earlier, that people that are in one-to-one therapy, the therapist very often is like, you're not the only one going through this, that kind of thing. But it's not until they actually hear it from other people, like in a men's or women's or non-binary group or whatever, that they can actually see that they're not the only ones going through it. So like how amazing would it be if there were these, you know, more public spaces where people talked about the things that are taboo, so they could see, you know, or they could hear that they're not the only ones, and that people have come out the other side.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's pretty unlikely that once somebody starts speaking about something that's bothering them and starts taking steps, like it's pretty unlikely that they don't resolve what it is, you know? Like you were sharing with me earlier that, you know, just within a few sessions, women are telling you that they feel like a new person, or like, you know, they never could have felt this way, or that kind of thing, you know? So it's interesting that it takes a little bit of like vulnerability, you know, when people are already feeling vulnerable. But if you just go a little bit deeper maybe, and I don't know, reach out, that you can get to the bottom of it or something.
Yeah, and I think something that I pick up on with that is with the women that I work with, it really comes down to a level of building that internal trust for their inner compass, because there's a lot of well, I don't want to assume, but just the I think with so much that happens without having the proper awareness or information to go about on, there's a lot of guessing. And within that guessing, there can be a lot of circumstances that happen that make us doubt or question ourselves and our choices that we make. And that can also be propelled and amplified, like a sense of not trusting our intuition because we've made choices in, for example, our sexuality where we haven't established proper boundaries, and so we're making choices, and so then if those circumstances within our sexuality without those proper boundaries ended up not being pleasant experience, or ended up not being a very serving experience for either themselves or for both people, it can make them feel really uncertain about how to really tap into that sense of knowing that they can trust their intuition, knowing that they can trust the signaling that their body is presenting to them when something doesn't feel fully right, or maybe it's not a full fuck yes in the dynamic, or this feeling of like, can I actually experience what I want after so many times of not happening? Like there can be a certain level of hopelessness or disheartenment that occurs, and disappointment that occurs when we're constantly overriding our own boundaries. And then on top of that, it's like we're experiencing pain from, you know, sexual interaction, or it's like we're not able to communicate what we actually want because there's so much fear and shame around voicing our emotions and what's actually going on for us. As you're saying, like it takes a certain level of vulnerability to connect deeper and to trust. Like, how can we trust another person to accept and love ourselves when we don't do that fully for ourselves? So there's a certain level of like moving towards that fear and taking one baby step towards our edge, and feeling that, meeting our edge in that, and like being able to build that sense of self-soothing within the nervous system and within our minds around like, you know, you can survive that. If it doesn't turn out the way that you would hope by sharing your vulnerability and your transparency and your truth in that moment, like even if that happens, like you're still going to survive that. And you can like learn to trust that the more you honor what's actually arising for you, and honor where your yeses and nos are, or honor your like what you actually need in the moment, that actually builds deeper trust with others. And it allows people to receive that, and for them to look at that and be like, wow, she's taking care of herself. on a subconscious level, even like when someone is able to voice what they need and actually, you know, share what's happening with them vulnerably, it sends a level of deep respect and, you know, love and compassion from someone receiving that, being like, oh, like, wow, like, it's not a yes for her. Like, I definitely don't want to engage with someone who's not a yes. So, like, great. Like, what is a yes in this moment? And let's find the ways to bridge that with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, amazing. Yeah, it can be a trip because people know that they need or they want to talk to somebody about it, but it's just such an uncomfortable idea, you know?
Mm.
And it's all too often I see with people that, like, things get so bad that, like, now they have to talk to somebody about it.
Right.
You know, or I was talking to just a guy on the street yesterday, and I was saying, you know, it's good to go to, we were talking about men's group, and I was like, it's good to go to men's group, like, before there's an issue. You know, it's good to, like, start the talk before anything gets big enough to be like a monster or whatever.
Yeah.
You know? So, I mean, this is just another call for, like, people to be talking about sexuality more openly and, you know, just normalize it.
Yeah. Yeah. The amount of times that I've actually see people being able to tap into the things that they want to experience in their sexuality happens so much more easily when there's not as much resistance to sharing what's actually going on, or you know, having that normalized space around it. Like, it just makes them feel like, oh, it's actually not that big of a deal to want this thing that that could be deemed as taboo from someone else, but that actually is just a normal, that word is, like, not usually in my vocabulary, so I don't know why it's showing up now, but it's just, I think, like, the normalization of the conversation at least can really help to for people to create that spaciousness of questioning, like, what is it that actually, like, how do my current or past beliefs, how have they served me, and do they continue serving me now? Do I want to hold on to this thing? Like, how is it, what's the purpose of it in my life? And is it actually bringing me closer to what I want? And if not, what do I need to do to shift it? And hopefully that questioning or that inquiry comes before, as you're saying, before it gets to an extreme. I think sometimes it's too, like, if we're over ignoring our needs often, whether we're in a family dynamic or within our work in a career, it's like, if we're not taking care of our needs, then it's like it gets to that point when, like, you know, a health crisis comes through, or then that we're having constant arguments with our spouses, or you know, things just start happening where you might get into, like, frazzled states of nervous system coping mechanisms, where then it's like you get into unhealthy habits, or you get into car accidents, or whatever happens, you know. It's just, I feel like all of this ties into this level of awareness that can come back to that center of focus of being like, okay, well, what is it that I need? And how is my nervous system responding to this need? And how can I soothe that part of my nervous system so that I can feel safe in my own body? And with that safety, relaxation is present. And when relaxation is present, sexual energy can move. When there's a lot of stagnation and blocks and tension in the body and our minds around our life in general, all the stressors and contexts that play out in our life really affect how we feel our sexuality and our sexual energy. So yeah, I feel like the more we can normalize it all, it creates so much more, like, ease around, like, oh, I was able to share this thing with my partner around, like, how angry I was about this thing that happened, and because they heard me, he, like, witnessed me in my anger, and that he was just able to lovingly share compassionate space. It allowed me to feel that for my own self as well. And now I feel deeper connected in love and intimacy with them. And with that feeling, like that can also spark like desire and passion and arousal in that moment. Usually I notice that for myself when like someone meets me with full compassion and presence. I'm like, oh, like I just like slobbered everywhere with my snot and tears, and I just raged out, and you just were just like, you know, like I still love you. Like, how beautiful is that? And then all of a sudden the pussy just starts speaking, and she's like, whoa. You know? I don't know if you ever get that feeling. I do.
Well, I don't have a pussy, but
do you ever feel the tingles? The tingles? Like you get tingles, right?
I get tingles, yeah.
Yeah, tingles, like when there's like that presence, when someone is so present, like loving presence is so strong that you can just share vulnerably what's happening for you, and then it's like all the hardness around that experience, or the hardness around your heart and the emotional state that you were carrying, just like melts like honey.
Yeah.
Like honey in the cells, it just melts, and then it's like there's this expansion and opening and like warm washing of like, yeah, just sensual flow and ease and freedom. Yeah,
I love it. That's beautiful. Yeah, is presence not the most important thing that we give our clients?
Yeah, that's a good question.
You know, just like showing them that there's no judgment, there's you know, there's no shame. Like I see you, you know. It's so important.
Yeah. Well, our whole society is like not carrying that with that in mind. You know, it's like there's judgment everywhere. So it's like so relieving to be in spaces with practitioners or certified practitioners that are able to just to hear you and see you without that. Like how much more soothing that is for, anyone who enters into those spaces.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So within the coaching and your work with the women, so we could say presence is the first thing that you give them. What does that look like? Like how are you able to have these experiences of in few sessions, like helping them find breakthrough?
Well, I feel like that's so dependent on each individual, because everyone's journey is different. There's a certain flavor of every personality, of every experience, what their past self has gone through and what they're ready for. Like there's going to be a different string weaving through that in our sessions together. Part of like one of the main reasons why women come to me for our sessions is that they have a gift that they want to be in service for in the world. They want to share who they are and create positive impact and change based off of something that they love to do and to be and to feel, and they also want to do that in a way that feels really good for themselves. They want to be able to feel connected to all aspects of their inner power, the feelings that they have, just the feminine power that they carry within them is just so vast and beautiful and divine and powerful. And I think they want to feel really connected to that and believe in that fully themselves, because I think sometimes they know it's within them, but they don't fully believe that it's possible they feel like it's so distant from them somehow, that they feel a little disconnected, or that they don't fully know how to embrace it. And so part of the work that we do together is to kind of like go into the subconscious and help them to create the awareness that what they want is actually not far away from their reality, and that the parts of themselves that are creating that story or that narrative, that it is far away, like we kind of go through that and we integrate those pieces lovingly in the subconscious so that they can not be a hindrance or a block to creating steps or actually feeling how they want to be feeling, but they actually become part of like their inner council a little bit. Like maybe there's a self-sabotaging pattern that's around, maybe they are choosing to snack a lot when actually they want to be like writing a book or like dancing on stage somewhere in their full activated feminine Shakti or whatever. But instead of choosing to sit down and do those things, they're constantly getting up and snacking, and that takes out hours of the day to actually sit down and do those things. And part of that pattern might be coming from a belief that they don't actually feel like they are worthy of what they want, or that they feel like they fear that they might be a failure, and that they are coming from an imposter. They have this imposter syndrome or something. So part of the work is to allow them to feel that peace, integrate it with love, and to find out how it's serving them in some way, and then find the opposite and make a commitment around showing up for that peace and for yourself in a way that is creating the opposite effect. So giving that peace what it needs, and then offering it what you actually want instead to be feeling. And so that also gets tied into then them being able to get out of their minds a little bit more deeper on a belief level or a subconscious level, so that they can start feeling and embody that. And then that's when we can focus on the pleasure aspect, because pleasure really it creates a lot of cellular changes in our DNA to actually create change in the body. So when you activate your pleasure, and when you are able to tap into getting into your body and into your breath, sound, and movement, and feeling good within yourself at the same time, then you're more likely to be successful in what you want to do, because you feel good about yourself. People generally are not likely to create action towards what they want when they don't feel good about themselves. So the pleasure aspect of our work really helps them to recognize that they have access all the time to this energy. It's just sometimes our beliefs about ourselves really hinder that feeling that they're able to tap into that. And the realization that I often see from them is like, they, after a few sessions of working with, closing off energy leaks, or being able to offer them an embodiment practice or a rage release practice, where then they can come into more of a healthy relationship with these aspects of themselves that they deemed shameful or harmful, and actually love those pieces more and not fear them as much. Then they're like, it's almost like their feminine power gets unleashed, and they just trust themselves so much more. And with that trust, they embody this level of internal reference point that they can trust putting boundaries up. They can trust how to say no and actually feel good about it. They can trust, that they can try something out, and if they make a mistake, that it doesn't make them a failure, that it actually will add to their success, and that with practice and over in time, practice, that it gets them closer to what they actually want in life. Whether that's putting their gifts out, whether that's attracting a loving partnership, or from experiencing different forms of pleasure in their body. There's just so much possibility that can unearth from that.
Nice. Yeah, it just sounds like empowerment is the key. Realizing that it's not so far away, that it's not out of grasp ever.
Yeah.
But it's just like reaching out and you having the power to grab it, right?
Yeah, and not focusing so much on what other people think, or how, actually coming to recognize that you can actually be the creator of living your life for you, not based off of how someone else thinks you should be living. And I think there's a lot of influence that happens around in our environments that impact the way that we influence ourselves to either, create move towards the desires that we actually want to be living, whether that's in our sexuality or within our leadership or within work or relationships or whatever, and recognize that we're the common instigator of being able to create that for ourselves. If you have a desire, embrace that desire, and let's find a way to come into it where it's coming from that place of you recognizing that it's part of your wholeness, not necessarily that it's separate from you in any way. Like, you deserve that. That's part of you. Yeah.
That's so beautiful.
Mm.
I would love to talk about basically sexual trauma, and from the women's side, because to me what I see is that, you know, for a woman to receive a partner, you know, it's such a vulnerable act. You know, you're letting somebody into yourself, and so when that vulnerable act gets like taken advantage of, like, it's no wonder that, you know, that can be really hard for people to come back from, you know? So what does that path back to embodiment, what can it look like?
When you, just for clarification, when you say taken advantage of, could you describe a little bit more about what that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, that could look like rape. That could look like I don't know, any type of sexual assault, I guess. Because it's like one of the most vulnerable parts of being a human is our sexuality, you know. And then when that gets assaulted, you know, or something against our boundaries happens, you know, and more than, I guess I'm talking more from the stance of like more than just being unable to say no in the moment, you know, like in the case of like saying no and being ignored, that kind of thing. Right.
Yeah, from my general understanding is that when there's a certain level of nervous system override, the response will either be to fight, flight, or freeze. The fight response in our nervous system is when we actually are able to voice that no. The flight response would be to kind of frantically find ways out of it, or want to move away somehow, whether that's physiologically or internally, to create safety, or the freeze response, which would be the place within the nervous system response where that no, even though they feel it and there's a voice that's yelling inside of them, just say no, stop it, and they're not able to actually communicate it because there's a block there, and the nervous system is just in such a state of response that it's not able to be communicated. So yeah, I think it depends on the circumstance of what is happening, because, you know, whether if it's assault or whether or not it's, you know, maybe just like an ex-boyfriend coming by and then, you know, not actually wanting to have sex, but then he goes in it anyway and not able to say no in that circumstance, where it's not necessarily fully abuse, in that more like rape contact. Well, it is kind of rape, but I think there's so many drastic circumstances that my brain is kind of going in all different directions around like how to answer that question. And so I think a part of me, like what comes back to, how can someone kind of move from that place of experiencing trauma, no matter what form it comes in, and first recognizing what trauma is and how to really identify that, like how that shows up in the nervous system is first. So many people can experience trauma and walk around through life not knowing that they're carrying trauma, and then are surprised to experience all these things happening in their life, and they don't know why it's happening, and it's because mostly it's probably a response that they got from experiencing trauma. And so part of like healing trauma is to really be trauma aware and to start learning and understanding how trauma works in the body. That would be one thing that I would really recommend for people. And a part of that learning and awareness is around recognizing the trauma and understanding that trauma can live in the tissues and the cells of the body. So when we experience a trauma response, like rape or assault, sexual assault, the body will tense and hold itself a certain way. And when there's tension, it will hold on to that tension in parts of the body. So it might hold on to it in the pelvic bowl. It might hold on to it in our shoulders or in our belly, or in the way that we, somewhere in tension will arise. And I'm trying to remember where I was going with that thought. Understanding trauma and how it works in the body. And then understanding that in order to move that tension through the body is to actually embody shifting that through the body. So we can't just think. Most of the time, like, there's a certain level of talk therapy or talking that can help us to understand and conceptualize something, but it doesn't help us to fully change or shift that in ourselves. So going through the somatic work of embodying that shift through sound, breathing, and movement can really help to move that stagnation and stuck tension in the body so that you can release the trauma in your cells, and that it will open up spaciousness to feel a sense of safety or grounding or resources internally, so that you can start feeling love and the capacity of pleasure, or feelings of goodness in the body again. Because I think there can be a huge disconnect when we're trying to heal something and then we feel numb or disconnected from feeling what we want, and then we overlayer that with feelings of frustration and all these sense of self-judgment on ourselves around wanting that healing and then it not happening, and it just creates a pattern of disconnect. So part of that is to breathe through it, get the cortical part of the mind to stop thinking so much and get into the body so that the body can start navigating its own healing and wisdom, because the body is so wise that it can pretty much be self-healing. It's just we have to kind of allow the body space to give it room to speak and communicate to us. And by doing the sound, breath, and movement, it bridges that pathway between the body-mind to build that communication. So yeah, when we build that communication, it then ripples out and creates this domino effect of like being able to understand what grounding or the sensation of grounding feels like in the body, what the sensation of safety feels like in the body. Because when someone experiences trauma, sometimes they don't actually know what safety feels like. And it allows so much more of that communication of understanding the sensations and sensate focus, where then you can then work on building multi-orgasmic pleasure from having that awareness afterwards.
Yeah, wow, beautiful. So it sounds like with any sort of trauma, it's about, gaining an understanding of what trauma is, because for people it is so much more than just like a memory of an event, right? So starting with the understanding of, how your body is maybe holding that, and then getting into actual practices and exercises where you're using your body, your voice, your movement, to then move that energy, kind of thing.
Yeah, they, oh my gosh, my teachers would just like hit me on the face, but there's can't remember if it's Bessel von Kolk or if it's Peter Levine. I think it's Peter Levine.
Fact check.
Yeah, fact check. But no, they mention that trauma lives in the, trauma is not the issue, trauma lives in the tissue. So there's a certain level of healing that happens when, yes, the healing of trauma is recognizing the story around how it was created and acknowledging it. That acknowledgement is so important along the healing, and that's probably one of the first steps to that. Then there comes a point when it goes beyond just the story, and it's not about the story. That's beside the point. After that acknowledgement has happened and a certain time of sitting with that and acknowledging that has been present, then it's time to move it out of the actual body holding and to work on it through the tissues, because tissues hold cellular memory through many multi-generations. So no matter if it's intergenerational trauma or micro or major traumas that are happening right now, that lives in our tissues, and to move through that so that we can experience more freedom, not only in our body but in our subconscious, We have to be able to get past the idea that it's all about the story, and that really move into just embodying the change that we want to be.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. And we were even talking about like the stories earlier, and they're just stories, you know?
Yeah.
It takes just the awareness and this taking the steps to like start to change those things, you know? I'm curious, what are you really excited about? Like, is there aspects of this, of these modalities that, you know, you're getting into or like reaching towards? Like, is there anything?
It's never ending.
Yeah. So what's the exciting things on your horizon that you're looking to get into?
Oh, that's kind of vulnerable. What's on the horizon? It's interesting. I feel an inspiration to move towards the deeper layers of energy work. So much of the energetics get woven into my coaching containers, where it's like, I mean, it's energy is present all the time, but it's just, there's this aspect of the energetics within our belief system, like that carry through in our belief systems, and that imprint the way of moving through self-sabotage or through limiting beliefs that I really am interested to dive more into. And how that also can be facilitated through journeying into like deeper layers of the soul, and soul fragmentation, that I want to really hone in on more skills to create deeper spaces for that sort of integration. And I don't know fully when or how that's going to look, but that's an interest of mine. There's also a level around trauma work that I would be interested in learning more about, just for my own ethical reasons. I'm trauma informed, but I'm not a trauma expert. So there's aspects around that I feel interested to know more about, just so I have a deeper awareness around, you know, just the extra tool belts to navigate circumstances, or languaging that can be really helpful for someone when they do come into that space. Gosh, there's so much. There's a lot. There's a lot. I don't know if I'm a multi-passionate person that wants to try to weave it all in, and I know that sometimes that's not the most best for marketing purposes, but I think like a part of my own passion, like I do passions for my own personal development, so I'm not necessarily doing it necessarily for my clients, but I know that they'll benefit from me growing and working on myself, and embodying and following and listening to that inner voice that's passionate about something. And yeah, so whatever that is, whether it's through, you know, movement and dance, or through energy healing work, trauma awareness, or around I don't know, like repatterning beliefs, it's all passions of mine, for sure.
Yeah, that's so good. That's what's going to keep you so successful, is that, you know, you're so curious, and you're so willing to be diving into these things for yourself first. Because I mean, for me, that's where I find the value in things, is like with breathwork. Say, you know, I would have never become a breathwork facilitator if I didn't have super profound experiences for myself first, right?
Yeah.
Or, you know, same thing with yoga. You don't just become a teacher before you've been practicing.
Yeah, and it's not even to say that some of the things that we are passionate about will be necessarily something that we are doing for work or for career or for teaching, but it's us taking care of ourselves by listening to that inner guidance and being like, this is what I need for my own healing, and I'm going to do that for myself, and that will get carried through in the transmission of our aura or through our presence without having to teach it to someone. Sometimes just that presence of that healing and that modality is felt without having to put a charge on it or to monetize on it. So yeah, I find that there's a lot of value in doing the things that you're passionate about, whether or not you know, it's like the best career investment or whatever, it's like, it doesn't really matter. If you're doing the things that you love, that's going to magnetize the people in your life that are going to really benefit from you anyway, and you're going to learn and gain from as well. So, yeah.
What is your real push for like self-development? Like, what have you found that you've gotten out of it?
For myself personally?
Yeah.
Oh, that's like a really soul diving question. I think just like a level, not to sound like ultimately like super depressing, but I think there's a certain level of comfortability with my suffering that I feel like personal development has really helped me to establish deeper. Like human nature for me, and the way I experience my own human nature, there comes a certain level of darkness and like an inner void, which I identify as a lot of what's the energies I feel in my womb space or womb power. But there's a certain level of suffering that is creating awareness around how to feel comfortable in my humanness, and personal development work has helped me to create a loving, healthy relationship with that part of myself, whereas before I would have judged it and felt like something was wrong with me. And I feel like it's helped me to understand I think just to understand my soul a bit deeper. And I don't know how to really like describe that without going on to like some sort of tangent or like, you know, gloomy philosophical discussion. I feel like, it's just created a lot of healing for me in places where sometimes I didn't know how to ask for that. And it's also helped me establish that relationship to, creator or God or an essence of belonging to this earth and to humanity that feels more connected. So I don't know how else to describe it. We'll just kind of...
That was really good. That's complete. Totally. Know thyself.
Yeah.
Get clear.
Yeah.
Get to know God, the universe, creator.
Well, and myself through my relationship with all that.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I don't know if that's really like fueling this, my why I do things that I do. Right. I just like, I don't actually even know the full answer to that. I feel like sometimes I just like blurt out something like in the moment for marketing purposes, but my actual like feeling of knowing why, it's like, like there's no other option for me. It just feels like if I wasn't working on myself or tending to myself, I'd probably just not choose to live. I don't know.
I totally get it.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. Is there any closing messages or insights or things you want to send to the people? Big pressure.
Take everything I say with a grain of salt.
No way. You're a genius.
I don't... You're your own masters. I don't know. Like I don't. Yeah, I feel like everyone has the capacity to heal themselves, and trust that. Trust that in your internal referencing. Yeah, I don't know what else to say.
No, that's perfect. Where can people find you?
Well, I am offering a one-on-one VIP mentorship for women who are wanting to dive into all the things that we discussed today in our conversation. You can find me at www.zaharadevi.com, or you can find me on my social media platforms, Zahara X Devi on Instagram or Zahara Devi on Facebook.
Beautiful. And we will post links.
Yeah, links will be posted.
Right there.
Yeah.
Or there. I don't know. We're not that pro. Thank you so much. I'm glad to finally meet you. And
yeah, what a pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing such a beautiful presence and conversation. And yeah, I look forward to staying connected with your community and whoever is interested in reaching out. I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, totally. Cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You heard it here, folks. There's lots to do, and there's people that want to help. So reach out, take the first step. Mm-hmm. Thanks a lot for coming by today, and we'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Nailed it!